and has played a very significant role pre-pandemic, during the pandemic, and if I can safely use the word, post-pandemic as well, as we are in it now. By the interactions that I've had with the CII, and particularly Mr. Kotak, I should admit, you have been at a one-on-one and also through the CII kept that momentum of consultation going. Each of your members have also been actively seizing every opportunity that you may have to interact with me. And of course, as and when Prime Minister has invited you all, have had very extensive conversation. And for a nation to go through, along with the global community, a pandemic which has never been seen for the last 100 years, I think Indian economy is benefited by the collective participation, thinking, and coordination of efforts. And that is why today we are sitting up and speaking about India 75, which is at 2022. To be able to sit up after a second wave which was unprecedented, nobody could predict the intensity, the scale, the speed with which the second wave reached us, could have taught us sitting up a couple of months afterwards to say, how do we want India to move towards India 2022, when India will be 75 years free of a foreign rule? So that itself shows what collective participation, collective thinking, collective sharing of thoughts, and all our efforts being put together can give India. I particularly thank the Indian industry for having been very level-headed, faced the challenge of the first and even faced the challenge of the second wave of COVID, where many countries are still wondering how they would face the economy and also pick the economy from where it is left behind. So, meeting as we are at this juncture,
request everybody to please put your microphone on mute when the Honorable Finance Minister is speaking, please.
So, I can always, from our side? I can always recall how after the lockdown in 2020, we saw the government ensuring, first of all, that lives have to be saved, and for full 8 months, we had government supporting the poorest of the poor, the vulnerable population of India, 80 crores of people being given their food grain supply free of cost, together with it also some money in their Jan Dhan accounts, and above all, also cooking fuel for 3 full months. 8 months this continued, and we could see that when in comparison to many of the countries outside, no Indian was left feeling hungry and then having to go to bed. And unlike the early 20th century pandemic, where more people apparently died of hunger and starvation and malnutrition rather than by the pandemic itself, India has ensured, because of the foresighted quickness with which Prime Minister Modi responded, India has ensured that no poor, dispossessed Indian remains starving. No Indian would go to bed without a meal of some sort. So with that major humanistic approach, which a government is duty bound to take, we saw that the first and the basic humanitarian problem was at least somewhat addressed. Post that, efforts were taken, and the first quarter, the last quarter of last year, or the first 3 months of this calendar year, you saw manufacturing growing by about 6.9%, construction growing by about 14.5%, and even tractor sales in the rural areas going up by 18%. So the core sector's growth of about 8.9% was, if I may say, was largely because of the public capital expenditure. Government's capital expenditure being pushed with a great force behind, with the complete energies of the Prime Minister being showcased and also very clearly driving the ministries, particularly those ministries which had an infrastructure bandwidth, to ensure that the money which was being given to them, which was declared in the budget, an unprecedented commitment made for industry, infrastructure sector. So the monitoring of the public capex was clearly from the level of the Prime Minister, Finance Minister, respective infrastructure related ministries, and so the public expenditure ensured that the core sector grew and grew at about nearly 9% growth, 8.9%. One other big story about the pandemic affected Indian economy last year and this year, FDIs have been flowing into India non-stop because there was this confidence about the macroeconomic fundamentals, about how the whole world was looking at shifting some of the investments from some geographical terrain to something else, and therefore they chose India. And as a result, you saw we probably were in the third or the fourth place in 2020 in getting FDI. And even this year, in the first 5 months of this year, we have had about 37% more FDI coming into this country compared to the last. Last year itself was FDI good story. FDI comfortably flowing into India. But this year we find that in the first 5 months, there's a 37% increase compared even with the good last year. Foreign exchange reserves are at 620 billion as of July 2021. So the indicators are very clear that the economy is buoyant, and the buoyant economy, buoyant in the sense of recovery time buoyancy. It can, of course, aspire for more, but the recovery is very clear. The messages and the indications which are coming are very clear that the economy is revving to come out. And one story which I would definitely want to pick up on is a 2019 story, which is a pre-pandemic story. All of you are aware that at that time the issue was credit, availability of credit, want of credit, businesses suffering for not having credit. So the banks sitting over tons of money and credit not being given to them. I remember going all around the country well before the festive season and hearing people tell me, no, I'm sorry, it's not happening, credit is not available. And since then we had announced a credit outreach, which commenced sometime late September, early October. And since then till today, nearly 5 lakh crores have been put into the economy through the various credit outreach programs. Even that 1 year, between 19 October, September, October, till about March, we had already achieved over 2 lakh crores. But totally today, 5 lakh crores have purely gone on account of credit outreach, which the banks were nudged to take up, and they had taken it up. So I would want to just spend one little more minute to tell you that if you were to look at the four crucial engines, net exports, today the story, you know what is happening, exports are really growing. And some of the exports are particularly the steel and some core industries which are happening here. The industry themselves are saying, yes, the growth is phenomenal. Public investments, I've said that infrastructure investments are at one of the highest ever in India's history in terms of the proportionate amount being given and spent as well. Consumption has been given all the boost which it requires. Through the supply side management, we made sure that the essential instruments are activated so that industries, the small ones, are making sure that they are not going to be down under, their employees will be kept up. The EPFO support that the government has given, today the figure, committed figure continues to remain open. Many industries, particularly the MSME sector, has benefited by the government's contribution into the EPFO. That has been extended now till 2022. Although last year when we announced it, we said it will be available till June 2021. Where are Indians saving or investing? That's a fourth engine that normally all of us would like to talk about. And this is one example which I've quoted probably even the last time I spoke to you. Indians are not anymore looking at just bank savings. They are quite open to going into the stock market, looking at very well listed, well accounted, well transparently managed companies, and they are investing through very openly opening up demat accounts. And if the number of new demat accounts opening is an indicator to where the Indians are putting their savings, you will be surprised that per month, where it was 1 lakh accounts, today it is multiplied by 3 per month. So 3 lakh accounts have been opening up during the last year pandemic, and this year too it is continuing. So Indians are putting money into the market and taking shares in companies which are managed well. Now, if I were to just tell you in 6 different headings, the way in which our government is looking at being an active participant in the recovery of this economy. First thing is, government is committed, first of all, to doing everything that it requires to be done for the economy to be revived. And since last year, the 5 mini budget, this budget, where very clearly money has been put where it matters. Infrastructure, health infrastructure, giving money for vaccination, because that is short one way in which you can protect your citizens, creating pediatric center just in case, God forbid, there is a third wave. So government's commitment for recovery is shown in so many different ways, and we are going to continue doing that, because recovery and its sustainability is something which the Prime Minister is very keenly invested in. Second, the pandemic and just the recovery is not the story. You would have seen in the monsoon session how much ever there were disturbances for political purposes. Ministry of Finance and Corporate Affairs alone has cleared 7 very critical bills. Whether it is on the deposit insurance for the small depositors whose cooperative bank or anything gets into difficult times, we are taking care of the depositors there. The tribunal bill, through which the delay in cases which are going through different levels of justice and then ending up in the courts, as much consuming that much money and also time, we brought in that. Abolished some of the tribunals which are really not managing too many cases, and made sure that justice is delivered directly by the courts rather than one intermediary layer of a tribunal. Factoring regulation, which was introduced last time but went to a standing committee which has come back, is again a major shift in being able to bring in more than 9,000 NBFCs who will now all across the country be available for factoring and helping the small medium industries to have their bills discounted in various ways, different portfolios, and therefore they would be getting risk based or without risk their money in time. The Insolvency and the Bankruptcy Code, again passed this time with an amendment to the Act for the pre-pack, which is a very informal way of handling the cases, less expensive way of handling it, and more approachable way of handling for the MSMEs. So that bill was also passed during this session. I think most importantly, all of us would be happy to know that the general insurance bill which was passed, amending the Insurance Act which existed from before, even if there is going to be a 51% or below giving away of government control. So there are, even in this narrow sessions, the Limited Liability Partnership Act, which is going to make it easy for so many small startups and also LLPs, which are nowadays taking off in very many numbers, because professionals like to have the flexibility of partnership and also have a better ease of doing business because the regulations are far better. Uday Kotak just spoke about regulations which have to be better. This is one way in which we have brought the regulatory mechanism to the minimum by looking at the compoundable offences and also doing it through an internal mechanism rather than with the nature of criminality, taking it to the courts. The internal mechanism is far smoother and softer. More importantly, haven't we had industry each time telling us about, it's all right, you've done all this, what about the retrospective tax of 2012? I was glad that the Prime Minister spoke about it yesterday. He very clearly showed that if we respect the environment of stability and predictability which industry wants on the taxation regime, and as a result you never approved of a retrospective application, and we have been in agreement with the industry even when we were in the opposition, you saw us waiting for the logical conclusion that was required to be reached because of the tribunal sitting over them, arbitration verdicts which were to be waited. Once the arbitrations came out with the judgments, we had already cleared and waited for the monsoon session to have this bill brought in. So with these, I think we are very clearly showing our commitment to reforms, Prime Minister Modi's commitments to reform, even during a pandemic. So we didn't seek cover under a very difficult and challenging time to say, no, we are taking care of the economy, we'll have to revive it, we have to attend to people who need all the help, and so let reforms wait. No, we didn't do that. Every bit of the opportunity that we've had, whether it is the farm laws, labor codes, the IBC current amendments, the factoring, bringing in microfinance institutions to lend more, which is not a parliamentary thing, but it was a scheme announced, tribunals being abolished, our commitment to reforms continue, and we are showing it very clearly with tangible steps that we've taken through the parliament.